Caught my husband sneaking around while driving drunk and texting flirty messages to a married coworker. When I confronted him, he flipped the script, claiming it was just friends. Why isn't she getting that from her husband? I demanded. Is it emotional cheating? This is my first time posting, so I hope everything is legible. Furthermore, this will be a lengthy post because I need to address the entire list of coincidences. My soon-to-be ex-husband, 31 years old, male, and I are currently in the process of getting a divorce. Our separation is not at all related to his affair, but it certainly felt like a betrayal on his way out. I began to feel that our relationship was lacking in early February. It is now April. I asked him if we were okay, and he revealed a list of issues. I immediately shifted into problem-solving mode, offering therapy and trying to amend some of the behaviors that bothered him. For instance, I acknowledged that I am messy and not particularly skilled at housework, but I began to take responsibility for that. About 2 weeks after our initial conversation, he mentioned that he was going out for drinks with coworkers following his shift. He told me this around 10 p.m. as a manager of a brewery. This is not unusual. Around 11:00 p.m. I was still awake and had the munchies, so I made a pizza and deliberately left it out for him, assuming he would be home within the hour. However, I woke up around 2:45 a.m. and my husband had not returned. I had received a text from him around 11:30 p.m. saying he was on his way home. Yet the pizza had been put away, but he still wasn't home. I also noticed that the pizza had been put away carelessly, with pieces hanging out of the container, preventing the lid from closing properly, suggesting that a drunken person had handled it. This meant he drove home drunk, ate pizza, drove back out drunk, continued drinking with whoever he was with, and then drove home drunk for a third time. When I awakened, I called his friend Zach, who he said he was out with that evening. Zach had clearly been asleep and claimed he didn't know where my husband was. Well, that's just fantastic. He finally came home after 3 a.m. and told me he had been at the bar Sharky's with a group of people. The following day, I was primarily concerned about the drinking and driving. This was completely out of character for him. It was genuinely reckless and beyond dangerous, considering he drove intoxicated 3 separate times. So my focus was on his safety, and I only reprimanded him for that. The next night, I don't know what came over me. We had been together for 12 years and married for 2, and I had never sensed any infidelity. Yet that feeling struck me unexpectedly. He was asleep and I decided to look through his phone. In his Facebook messages, I discovered that his female coworker, Callan, who is also married, by the way, had been messaging him. I found it a little strange that she was using Facebook Messenger to contact him, considering she had his phone number. That seemed unnecessary and odd to me. She is about 10 years older than us, so think of the generational differences in how boomers and millennials communicate. One of her messages was sent at 1:30 a.m. and stated, "Hey, I actually went out and socialized tonight. You would be so proud of me." I must ask, why does she need someone else's husband to take pride in her socializing? Shouldn't she be receiving that from her own husband? Why is she messaging a married man at 1:30 a.m.? Additionally, why is she specifically typing out a smiley face? To me, that felt flirtatious and intentional, especially given her age. I was unable to view any prior messages since their conversation had end-to-end encryption enabled, affecting only her messages, while none of the others in his inbox shared that feature. This was intriguing. Upon finding that message and realizing she was flirting with him, I started asking questions the next day. Guess who he was out with that night when he came home and then left again? Bingo, Callan. Initially, he claimed it was a group of people and she wasn't present. Then it was a group of people, but she was there. Ultimately, his story evolved to state it was just her and supposedly one other girl. As I pushed him for more details, I eventually learned it was truly just her and that other girl, although I used supposedly lightly. Then I checked the closing times for the bar where he claimed he had been. Remember, he arrived home after 3 a.m., yet Sharky's closes at 1:30 a.m., and anyone familiar with bar operations knows there is typically last call 15 to 30 minutes before closing. So my husband, where were you? I acknowledged that I lost my temper and began saying things like, "You are both married, what the heck, you both are disgusting and should be ashamed of yourselves," emphasizing the disgusting and ashamed parts. I was furious. I discovered my husband had been dishonoring our marriage. Then I began to piece together all these details. I met Callan about 3 to 4 months ago. I thought we hit it off and shared a fun back-and-forth banter. I was excited that there was finally another woman at the brewery with whom I could be friends. However, in the last month, I noticed that she completely began avoiding me and avoided making eye contact whenever I visited the brewery. He had been working there for 6 years, was now managing it, and they catered our wedding's food and beer, creating a custom brew for the occasion. The entire staff was invited to our wedding. Everyone knows me, everyone greets me or at least offers a passing smile when I arrive. This is a community. But Callan, suddenly she became distant. In February, I hosted a floral pop-up at the brewery for Valentine's Day as I am a florist. One of the women who worked at the brewery came and bought flowers for her husband, which I thought was very sweet. I hadn't met her before, but I thought, awesome, another gal pal at the brewery. That night, I went ahead and added her and Callan on Facebook, realizing I wasn't connected with either of them on the platform. I am friends with everyone else at the brewery, including certain customers who have become friends. Remember this detail? This occurred on February 14th. Just 2 weeks after I inquired whether my husband and I were okay, and he confessed that we were not. Fast forward to a week later, he drove home drunk, stayed out with Callan until 3 a.m., and I found the messages. While conducting my investigation, I noticed that she had denied my friend request and changed her settings so that I could not add her. I had my best friend check her profile, and there it was, the add button available for her to send me a request. Yet when I accessed her profile, that button simply was absent. I also couldn't cancel anything as it was just missing altogether. She changed the settings specifically for me, but she was still interested in being friends with my husband and messaging him. Okay, cool girl, so I decided to add her husband on Facebook and he accepted my request immediately. I started to inquire further into what was transpiring after noticing that, and he informed me that they had also initiated a Spotify blend playlist, just the two of them, for work. You cannot control what songs your Spotify playlist includes. It automatically adds tracks based on your preferences. However, you can certainly remove songs. The song she contributed was one of Chappell Roan's most sexually explicit songs, Red Wine Supernova. The lyrics include, "So baby, let's get freaky, let's get kinky, let's make this bed get squeaky." Excuse me, when we first began dating, we shared music and created mixtapes for each other. While sharing music can be innocent, I believe this crosses a line as it reflects the way he flirts and builds a connection. He has never done this with other women, so it clearly isn't a norm. Also, side note, Chappell Roan is typically associated with the LGBTQIA community. What married woman would leave that explicit song on a playlist meant for a man who is her boss and for their professional work at a brewery? Just no. I also noticed, in a recent photo at the brewery featuring a group of people, that he and Callan stood next to each other. And who was next to him in his birthday shot video? Him and Callan. Coincidental perhaps, but this is too much to ignore given everything else at play. Another 2 weeks passed, and in the last week of February, my husband asked me for a divorce. At this point, I was in the process of packing and preparing to leave for my father's home. I reiterated how terrible it was for him to sneak around as a married man with another married person. What did he reveal to me? Callan and her husband are actually separated. Furthermore, her husband returned home to the East Coast. We are located in the Midwest. So when I initially discovered her messages and learned they had stayed out until 3 a.m., I was expressing that they should both be ashamed of their marriage, and he allowed me to believe she was still married. He already knew she and her husband were separated. Furthermore, he claims she hadn't told him directly but had told another coworker and he overheard it. My husband, even if she didn't confide in you, it was clear she was sharing her circumstances loud enough for you to hear because she wanted you to know she was available. Come on now. After our complete separation, I did request one thing out of the divorce. I asked him to please establish a boundary with the woman he had the affair with so I could achieve closure. I requested that he delete her from social media, limit any communication to only work-related matters, and cease spending time together outside of work, like going for drinks after shifts. If there truly was no affair and she wasn't a significant figure in his life, then what was the issue? I asked him to prioritize my feelings over hers. I made it clear I wasn't demanding anything outright. I was simply asking him to think about it for a day. The following day, he agreed to my request. He deleted her from social media, erased their Spotify playlist, and sent her a message via Facebook outlining the need for a boundary, stating that she was his employee and he was her boss, so they should only discuss work-related topics. This was a positive step. I admit I felt somewhat petty after he sent her the message about it, so I went to her husband's Facebook, remembering that he had accepted my request and liked the 4 most recent posts in which he had tagged her. I figured she would wake up to his message alongside the notifications of me liking photos of her and her husband. She blocked me and had her husband remove me from his friends list. I cannot imagine what explanation she gave him to prompt such action, but I hope he is doing all right. Now, as a side note, he did befriend another woman from a previous bartending job. She was also in a relationship. However, you know what the difference was? They both mentioned their partners to each other and immediately introduced us for double dates. We all enjoyed each other's company and became friends. I adore her, attended her bachelorette trip, and we were invited to their wedding where I provided the floral arrangements. They were also invited to ours and we all built a friendship. I brought this specific example up to him and asked if he and Callan were merely friends, and she was also married. Why didn't he introduce us all? What made her different from our current mutual friend? He had no answer or simply evaded the question altogether, and as I write this, I realize I never received a response. Recently, he has reneged on all his admissions and states he did nothing wrong with her. He actually complained to me, of all people, that it is frustrating to avoid her because of this situation. Oh, I'm sorry, is it? Is it genuinely frustrating to have to avoid the woman with whom you had an emotional affair? Please allow me to offer my deepest sympathies. I asked him how this creates any sort of dilemma. He provided a list. Attending beer festivals. Collaborating with other breweries. Going to live shows with coworkers. Company trips. Going to Lake Giacomo with Zach and other brewery personnel. Allow me to break this down for you. Beer festivals, the entire company is never able to attend these. Typically only a select few go while the remainder stays at the brewery. And he is the manager, responsible for scheduling. So he could either send her to the festival while he stays at the brewery or vice versa. Collaborations with other breweries, the same applies. The front of house staff where she works is not even involved. The brewers who create the beer and the owners of the partnering breweries are the ones solely involved in this process. It literally does not impact either of them and does not prevent either of them from performing their respective roles. Concerts with coworkers. When he mentioned this, I immediately inquired if he had attended shows with her as well. I was unaware of this and needed more evidence to confirm that he was indeed involved in the affair. He claimed he had only gone with one coworker who no longer works there. So then, what's the point? This example has nothing to do with her and doesn't change anything in his situation. Company trips. The brewery has only organized one company float trip in the past 4 years. Once again, no impact on him. Lake Giacomo with Zach. I asked if she had gone to the lake with them before. He stated she had not. So then how does that affect you? Every single example he provided to support why it was frustrating to have to avoid her was completely fictitious. These were all situations where he might encounter her, which could be effortlessly avoided. I'm incredibly frustrated because he initially confessed to having an emotional affair, yet he now asserts that he did nothing wrong and insists he was merely talking with a friend. He previously stated he would limit interactions with her only to work matters to provide me with closure and prevent anxieties surrounding my ex-husband working with the woman he had an affair with every day. Yet now he is complaining to me that it is frustrating. What do you all think? Is this an affair or just a friendship? Story 2. Caught my husband sneaking around with a married coworker, and when I confronted him, he claimed they were just friends. After his late-night rendezvous, I find flirty messages like, "You'd be proud of me." Now he's denying an affair. Was he really just socializing? This is my first time posting, so I hope this is all legible. Additionally, this is going to be a lengthy account because the entire list of coincidences needs to be addressed. My 31 female, soon-to-be ex-husband, also 31 male, and I are currently in the process of obtaining a divorce. Our divorce is not at all related to the affair, but it certainly felt like a nice little stab in the back on his way out. I noticed our relationship was feeling out of touch in early February. It is now April. I asked him if we were okay, to which he revealed a list of issues. I immediately shifted into fix-it mode, offering therapy and beginning to address some of the behaviors I exhibited that bothered him. To be honest, I am messy and not the best at housework, but I started to step up. About 2 weeks after the initial conversation, he mentioned that he was going out for a drink with coworkers after his shift. He told me this around 10:00 p.m. As a manager at a brewery, this behavior is not uncommon for him. At around 11:00 p.m., I was still awake and felt hungry, so I made a pizza and intentionally left it out for him, figuring he would be home within the hour. However, I woke up around 2:45 a.m. and my husband was still not home. I received a text from him around 11:30 p.m. stating he was on his way home, but the pizza had been put away, and he still wasn't there. I also noticed that the pizza had been stored carelessly, with pieces hanging out of the container to the point that the lid would not close, indicating that a drunk person clearly did it. So he drove home drunk, ate pizza, drove back out drunk, continued drinking with whomever he was with, and then drove home drunk for a third time. When I woke up, I called his friend Zach, whom he mentioned he was going out with that evening. Zach had clearly been asleep and said my husband came home but did not know where he was now. Okay, well, great. He finally came home after 3:00 a.m. and told me he had been at the bar Sharky's with a group of people. The next day, I was primarily upset about the drinking and driving. That behavior was completely out of character for him. It was incredibly reckless and dangerous, considering he drove intoxicated 3 separate times. My concern was for his safety, so I focused my frustrations on that. The following night, I do not know what came over me. We had been together for 12 years and married for 2, and I never had any suspicion of infidelity, but it suddenly struck me. While he was asleep, I looked through his phone. In his Facebook messages, I noticed that his female coworker, Callan, who is also married, what the heck, had been messaging him. I found it a bit odd because she has his phone number. If she wanted to talk to him, why use Facebook Messenger? That detail felt irrelevant but still strange. She's about 10 years older than us, so you can imagine the way baby boomers type and chat compared to millennials. Her message sent at 1:30 a.m. read, "Hey, I actually went out and socialized tonight. You'd be so proud of me." With the smiley face spelled out, "I am sorry, ma'am, but why do you need someone else's husband to be proud of you? Why aren't you seeking that validation from your own husband? Why are you Facebook messaging a married man at 1:30 a.m., and why are you specifically writing out a smiley face? To me, that feels flirtatious and intentional given her age. I could not see any previous messages because their messages are set to end-to-end encryption. Only her messages have that setting, whereas none of the other messages in his inbox do. Interesting. Once I found the message and realized this woman was flirting, I began asking questions the next day. Guess who he was out with that night when he came home and then went back out again? Ding ding ding. Callan. First, he claimed he was with a group of people and she was not there. Then it was a group of people and she was there. Finally, it turned out to be just her and supposedly one other girl. His story kept changing as I probed further, eventually revealing that it was just her and the other girl. The other girl, supposedly, I say. Then I checked the hours for the bar he stated he was at. Remember, he returned home after 3:00 a.m. Sharky's closes at 1:30 a.m., and anyone who works in bars knows they do last call 15 to 30 minutes before closing time. So my guy, where were you? I admit I lost my temper and began saying things like, "You are both married, what the heck, both of you are disgusting and should be ashamed," with emphasis on the disgusting and ashamed parts for sure. I was furious. I discovered that my husband had been sneaking around. Then I began putting all these pieces together. I met Callan about 3 or 4 months ago. I thought she and I hit it off and had a great back-and-forth banter. I was excited because there was finally a woman at the brewery and I could be friends with her. However, in the past month, I noticed that she completely began avoiding me and any kind of eye contact when I entered the brewery. He has been there for 6 years, managing it now. They catered the food and beer for our wedding and created a custom beer with the entire staff invited. Everyone knows me and everyone greets me or at least offers a passing smile when I arrive. It is a community, but for some reason, Callan suddenly did not engage. In February, I did a floral pop-up at the brewery for Valentine's Day as I am a florist. One of the other women who works at the brewery came and purchased flowers for her husband, which was quite cute. I love when a man buys flowers. She was very sweet and I had not met her yet, but I thought, awesome, another gal pal at the brewery. That night, I added her and Callan on Facebook because I realized I was not friends with them there. I am friends with everyone else from the brewery, including certain customers who have become friends. Remember this, okay? This happened on February 14th, just 2 weeks after I asked my husband if we were okay, and he revealed that we were not. Fast forward to a week later, when he was driving home drunk, staying out with her until 3:00 a.m. and my discovery of the messages. While I was conducting my investigation, I realized that not only did she deny my friend request, but she also changed her settings so I could not add her. I had my best friend, hey bestie, check her profile, and there it was, the add button ready for her to send a request. However, when I visited her profile, that button was completely absent. It was not available for me to cancel request either. The button was entirely gone. She simply changed her settings specifically for me but wanted to be friends with my husband and message him. Okay, cool girl. So I went and added her husband on Facebook and he accepted my request immediately. I started prying more into what was happening after I noticed that, and he told me that they also initiated a Spotify blend playlist with just the two of them for work. Now you cannot control what your Spotify automatically adds to this playlist. It takes your information and adds things accordingly. However, you can absolutely remove songs. The song that was added from her side was one of Chappell Roan's most sexually explicit songs, Red Wine Supernova. The lyrics state, "So baby, let's get freaky, let's get kinky, let's make this bed get squeaky." I am sorry, ma'am. When he and I first started dating, we shared music and created mixed CDs for each other. So I understand that sharing music can be innocent, but I know it is how he flirts and establishes a bond, so to me this crossed a boundary. He has never done this with other women, so it is clearly not a norm. And side note, Chappell Roan is popular among the LGBTQ community. What married woman would leave that song on a playlist intended for a man who is her boss for work at a brewery? Just no. I also noticed in the most recent photo taken at the brewery, where there were a group of people, guess who was standing next to whom? Him and Callan. And who was next to him in the birthday shot video? Him and Callan, perhaps a coincidence, but it doesn't feel that way with everything else added to the mix. Another 2 weeks went by and we reached the last week of February. This is when my husband asked me for a divorce. At this point, I was packing my things to leave for my dad's and I once again voiced how horrible it was for him to be sneaking around with another married person. What does he reveal? Callan and her husband are actually separated. Her husband returned home up east. We are in the Midwest. So when I initially found out she was messaging him and they were out until 3:00 a.m., I said, "You both should be ashamed, you are both married." He allowed me to assume she was married while knowing her and her husband were separated. He also claims that she did not inform him directly but told another coworker and he just overheard it. My guy, whether she told you directly or not, she was obviously discussing her situation aloud and clearly wanted you to know she was available. Come on now. After fully separating, I did ask him for one thing regarding the divorce. I requested that he please finally establish a boundary with the woman he had an affair with so that I could achieve closure. I asked him to delete her from social media, to only communicate with her at work for work-related matters, and to stop socializing with her, such as going out for drinks after work. If there truly wasn't an affair and she is not a significant person in his life, then what is the problem? I requested that he prioritize my feelings over hers. I told him I was not demanding this. I was merely asking him to take a day to consider whether he could do that for me. A day later, he said he could comply. He deleted her from social media, erased their Spotify playlist, and sent her a message on Facebook stating he wanted to set a boundary, explaining that she is the employee and he is the boss, so their discussions should remain work-related. Okay, good step. I admit I felt petty after he sent her that message, so I went to her husband's Facebook Remember. He accepted my request and made sure to like the 4 most recent posts in which she was tagged. That way she would wake up to his message and the notifications of me liking photos of her and her husband. She blocked me and had her husband remove me. I cannot imagine what her explanation was to him that led him to delete me, but I hope he is doing well. Also, as a side note, he made friends with a different woman from a previous bartending job. She was also in a relationship, but do you know the difference? They both mentioned their partners to each other and immediately introduced us for double dates. We all got along tremendously and are still friends to this day. I adore her and attended her bachelorette trip. We were invited to their wedding. I did the floral arrangements and they attended ours. We all became friends. I brought this very example up and asked him, if you and Callan are just friends and she is also married, why didn't you introduce us all? Why didn't you treat her the same way you treated our mutual friend? What is the difference between that friendship and the friendship you have with Callan, my guy? He did not provide an answer and evaded the question entirely, as I realize now that I never received a response. Recently, he has reversed his admissions and claims he did nothing wrong with her. He literally complained to me of all people that it is frustrating to have to avoid someone because of this. Oh, I'm sorry, is it? Is it frustrating to avoid the woman with whom you had an emotional affair? Please let me offer my greatest sympathy. I inquired how this presents any sort of dilemma to him. He provided a list. Working at beer festivals. Collaborating with other breweries. Attending live shows with coworkers. Company trips. Going to Lake Giacomo with Zach and other brewery employees. Allow me to break this down. Beer festivals, the entire company cannot attend, only a few go while the rest remain at the brewery. And he is the manager. He handles the scheduling, so he can choose to send her to the festival while he stays at the brewery or vice versa. Collaborations with other breweries, the same rule applies. Front of house staff like her are not involved in those decisions. The brewer who makes the beer and the owners of the breweries are the ones involved. This does not affect either of them. Attending shows with coworkers. As soon as he mentioned that, I asked whether he had been attending shows with her too, as I was unaware of that, and it became another instance I needed to add to the list of his questionable behavior. However, he confirmed he only went with another male coworker who no longer works there. So then why the concern? This example has nothing to do with her and does not change anything for him. Company trips. The brewery has only ever taken one company float trip, which was 4 years ago. So again, zero effect on him. Lake Giacomo with Zach, I asked if she had ever gone to the lake with them previously. He said no. So then how is that an example that affects you? Every single example he gave for why it is frustrating to have to avoid her was fabricated. They were all scenarios in which he might be around her that could be easily avoided. I am incredibly frustrated because he initially admitted to having an emotional affair, but now he insists he did nothing wrong and was merely talking with a friend. He initially promised he would avoid her except for work to help me secure closure, and now he complains to me that it is frustrating. What do you all think, affair or just a friendship?